so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality. And the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life, well, that's another. Which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host for the day, Erica Middlemiss. I am just another reflection and extension of you who will be here filling in for our beloved host, Brandon Beachum, leading the way to ensure your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. All right, all you positive heads, welcome. This is the 1000th episode of the podcast, and I am very, very excited to have a very special guest today. Our very own magical creator, Brandon Beachum, is here for a soul share today. Welcome to your show, Brandon Beachum.
Wow, this is such a privilege and an honor. Thank you so much for having me, Brandon.
It's my pleasure. Brandon.
Oh, thank you for stepping in. And this is actually Michael and Lizzie who are about to be on. Let's see, when is this released? They'll be on next week's episode if I've got my dates correct. And they were like, why don't you interview yourself for the 1000th episode? And I'm like, oh, that's a really fun idea. Okay. And then I got thinking about it and I was like, you know what? It's easier if Erica just does it. And so of course you're always such a good sport. So this will be fun. I can't, 1,000 episodes is wild. And not only is it interesting that it's landing on Lionsgate 8/8, which was my original due date. You know, you guys always hear me talk about my birthday stuff. Well, 8/8 was my original due date. And of course, it's Lionsgate, which supposedly, Lionsgate is this portal that, astrological portal every year that is, they're saying this one's a really significant one. It has to do with like Sirius lining up with the pyramids and goes back to Egypt. And yeah, so it's supposed to be major energetic influx and activation after the day at a time, in the Mayan calendars is July 25th. And then it like culminates on 8/8. And 8/8 is also the birthday of Dalian, who has, put a lot of energy in, and he's not currently, the person that is editing the episodes. That's a lovely Sarah Rusk, but a lot of 8/8 energy has went into these episodes. So I think it's really interesting that on this portal that's supposedly like such a significant one that we're hitting episode 1000.
Wow, not a coincidence at all.
Probably, most likely, could be, maybe not.
Definitely not. So Brandon,
definitely, maybe.
Brandon, let's be predictable here. And let's start with the question that we always start with. So,
what's that?
You're in an elevator. What could this possibly be? You're in an elevator. The woman next to you turns to you and says, what is your passion? You have 10 floors to answer. What do you tell her?
Ooh. And I've given very little thought to this question. It'll probably be a Willy Wonka answer, and we'll shoot through the stratosphere of the top of the elevator shaft. But my passion is sharing perspectives and shifting perspectives. As I talk about, on the show, spiritual alchemy is what I like to call it, helping myself and others to sift and shift perspectives until love emerges and aligns with the greatest and greatest version of ourselves, our higher selves. And that's what I strive to do myself. And I get so much joy from seeing others who tap into, whatever my vibrational offering is, this show or in person, or anytime I hear feedback from people that, oh, wow, what you're doing has really made a difference in my life. It's totally changed my world, or it's had a small impact, whatever it is, that lights me up more than anything I've ever done. I've done a lot of cool things in my life, but nothing lights me up more than helping others to navigate this reality and step into, more abundance and happiness and magic. And so, helping people to expand into their, helping people, all the caterpillars out there birth into butterflies as I do it myself, right?
Yeah. So I bet you haven't always been this magical being. Like, what has this journey been like? What started this whole spiritual journey for you?
Well, I was a magical being, a magical jumping bean from the moment I came out. My mother says I wouldn't sit still, and I was really hard to hold. I had to go. I had things to do. My dad talks about that too. He's like, I could never hold you. You would just put me down. I got things to do, places to go, things to explore, people to see. And so, I think this journey really started for me. I was raised very conservative Christian, and I was always fiercely independent. So it sort of resonated a little bit, but it also, things started as my brain more fully developed, the math started making less and less sense, if you will. It's hold on, this doesn't make sense. God loves me. God is infinite love. As long as I worship him and do what he says, otherwise he's going to torture me. Hold on. That doesn't really add up. And so around 2021, I met, and I was thinking about this person the other day. I don't even remember her name at this point, but she sparked me on this journey. This girl I met in Nashville, Tennessee, and she claimed to have psychic ability. And then I saw her do some psychic experiments that just kind of shook me. Hold on. Did her and her friend just do speak telepathically to each other, or did a bunch of things came up that were just really intriguing and interesting to me. So I started exploring metaphysical stuff and reading books. And I remember one of the first things was reading about out-of-body experiences, and my brother laughed at me dude, you're on crack. No one's leaving their body, having astral journeys, whatever you're talking about. But I had told him, one of the ways in this book I was reading, that you could do this, induce these experiences, was through lucid dreaming and becoming lucid in your dream. And he said, well, I don't know about leaving your body. I think that's BS. But the lucid dreaming thing, becoming awake in your dream, that's something that I used to do when I was a kid. So then he went from sort of making fun of me one day to the next day, because we had talked about lucid dreaming, it triggered it happening to him again. He had this powerful out-of-body experience. He went from one day making fun of me to the next looking like he'd seen a ghost. I was just outside of my body looking at myself laying there, and it was trippy AF. And so, those sorts of things started happening. I had some really powerful first, some of the first little magical synchronicities. I'd read I was reading, all this material about the stuff. And this guy talked about how he could communicate with animals. And he had called some animals to him in this really magical fashion. And I was in this excited state when I read this. And I was like, well, if he can do it, I can do it, And so I'm in my bedroom. And at the time I was in a 6-bedroom house, a big house in Nashville, Tennessee, with 6 friends. And I had the master. So it was a big, big room. And in the far corner, there was a moth flying. And I thought, okay, if he can communicate with animals telepathically, so can I. And I held my hands out and moth, come land in my hands. And it literally, Erica, it flew from the corner 20 feet away instantly and landed in the palms of my hand. And I was like, whoa. And by the way, I've tried it probably 50 times since, and it's never happened again. But that first time was, I believe, sort of the universe showing me, right? It was sort of building my confidence that there is something here. And then, as I got deeper down the rabbit hole and started reading about sort of perspectives on the ultimate nature of reality and how things are structured and who and what we are, it started resonating so deeply in my core. It was this remembering, like, oh, of course we're one with the source that creates and animates all things. What else could it be? Like it started, the logic of it all, the perspectives that we talk about on the show, it made such profound and deep sense to me. It was just like, picking up where I think my soul planned to pick up at 21 years old or whatever. I always say when you get about that age, you then pick up where you left off in your last life. Okay, you were in timeout during childhood. Now let's pick up and get to work. That's why a lot of times people's 20s can be kind of tumultuous. There's a lot of work to do, and so at that age, it's like, okay, coming online, here's what you're here to do. And for me, it just made so much sense. And so I'm looking around. This is like 1997, 96, 97. And I'm looking around like to people like talking to everyone about this. Like, oh my gosh, do you guys know what's going on here? Did you know that you're God and drag? There's only one of us in the room. Like people were looking at, especially back then, like I was crazy. It's kind of like, what are you smoking, dude? Or that's an interesting concept, and back to their normal lives. And then, no, there's a great awakening happening. It's going to happen. I could feel it coming. It only makes sense that it would come. And now here we are, 20 years later, and it's happening. And so I think I was just being prepared for, the work that I came here to do. Right. And so for me, it was like a very easy plug in, and then remembering, and then just being naturally who I am, talking about it, excited about it. It just lit me up like nothing else. And here we are.
Mm. So you mentioned that you did a lot of reading. There were some people that came into your life that helped to spark or catalyze this. And then what were some of the main books that really jumped out at you and that really kind of sparked even more?
Some of the original books, let's see, let me think back. Conversations with God, that was a really big, and there's multiple. I want to say there's 5 of them or something now. It started as a trilogy, and just, I'm not sure how many total there are now, but I highly recommend those books. Let's see. Power of Now, a little bit later. That's another really significant book, I feel. One that I read on the show, which came a little bit later as well, Oneness, I view as sort of the guidebook for ascension, if you will. Celestine Prophecy was the first book that I read. And it's like oh, really? Yeah, I think that was for a lot of people. Yeah, it's like a fiction book based off of real principles and explaining, and it's a great story. They did a movie that just did not even do it justice. The movie is kind of But the books, Celestine Prophecy and 10th Insight, if you enjoy stories and with, some like truths about, reality and the nature of reality interwoven, highly recommend those. So those are some of the very early foundational books. And there was a bunch of others, the Psychic Explorers one, all about out-of-body experiences, which I actually read some channelings from, within the last year or so. A lesser known book that I was reading, and experimenting with like out of body experience and astral projection, and never really had a lot of success with it. My brother did, and he didn't even want to, and he still to this day will have some of them spontaneously. But so those are a few of the initial books that sort of sparked me on my path.
So how did this whole concept of starting a podcast come up for you? What was that whole process?
I don't even remember the exact moment. For me, I knew for a long time that I was, from the time I was little, it's like just very driven. And I'm going to do big things. My mom will tell you from 5 years old or whatever, I was sort of talking very grandiose. And so once again, I think it was sort of in me. It's like, and at one point it's like, I know I'm meant to teach, and as I learn, and teach best what we most need to learn, as I like to say. And so it was, for years and years, me just saying, at some point I'm going to write books, or I'm going to step into some sort of medium to help raise consciousness on the planet. Although I was hyper focused on creating financial abundance early on, and I had a music distribution, pursuing making music and sort of raising consciousness through music. I was in a band, Kundalini, for many years. And we were, I was talking about, it's funny, even last night I had a little gathering here at the Mystic Manor, and there's someone freestyling conscious hip hop. And it's like all around me now. Back then, I was writing these like lyrics and rhymes that were all about consciousness, and people were like, what are you talking about? I was sort of ahead of the curve, I think. So we were like, our live performances, we'd have Alex Gray artwork up behind us. This is like 2000, 2001. People are like, what is that? And so that was sort of my first approach into it. Is like, oh my gosh, I'm one with the source that creates and animates all things. I can create and be anything. I want to make music, and I want to raise consciousness through music. So that was my first really step into that. Starting in 97, I formed my band, and we were together like 8 years. And then it went from that into, I went down the path of creating this music distribution platform that sort of started to take off. And then there was a bunch of like, my brother had a tragedy in his life. His girlfriend committed suicide, and, financial woes with getting it off the ground. And so I sort of halted it and set out to then, it was a lot of times like, okay, I need to create more abundance because I want to make major impact. So that was the story I was telling, so that was a focus after the band, for a while. And of course, I went from my friend's couch, in 2010 to an Inc. 500 fastest growing private company in the US. And then that was a crazy ride as well, and sort of hit a major wall with that, and challenges and betrayal by business partners. And then out of the ashes of that started, right towards the end of that, I started the podcast. That's when I was like, okay, I'm going to really just cut to the chase here. And I think that's an important lesson, telling a story of, I've got to have a lot of money to make a difference, or I've got to do this thing first to get to that thing. Be very, very careful with that energy, because it can create just long delays and lessons. And, I didn't need anything other than a microphone to start. And at one point I was probably sitting around my fire out back, at my house, a little fire pit, and there might have been some psychedelics involved, and I got into a state, an expanded state of excitement. And I think at the time Dalian might have just moved to town, and I was talking to him, and I was like, and it somehow came up, I should do a podcast. That's relatively easy to do. He was really good with audio, stuff. We had been in a band for years, and he's really good creatively. And he was like, yeah, I'll edit it. And he was even, the co-host on the original episodes. And so it just, one night, it just came out as an idea. Before that, leading up to that, I decided I wanted to create the Positive Head bracelet as an idea. And me and my partner, Anna, were going to do like a festival wear kind of like Etsy sort of store. And then we decided that was too much work. I had already created this bracelet, which I really liked the idea of a physical reminder on you. And I'm like, okay, well, we already went down that road. I need to do something more. Maybe it's time to actually start putting my message out there. And so it's like so many things, it just kind of comes quietly. And it really even started because of something else, that spawned it. But really, the real purpose for it all was the podcast. I learned quickly, and so it was a great lesson. And a lot of times, one thing will lead to another, which is really the reason for the first thing that you started down the path of.
Isn't that interesting how life works that way? We never really know. And then once we get to that result, we're like, oh, now I get it. That's why I went through all of this so I could get here. Thank you, universe. Yes. And if you can trust that along the way, that process, then you can really relax about. A lot of people think everything comes as this big magical epiphany all at once. And really, not that doesn't ever happen for people, but a lot of times it's just these little things that happen along the way. Next thing you know, you've been sort of directed on a path that's perfect for you. Yeah, exactly. So I'm wondering, when you first started it, did you have expectations of what you wanted it to be? And if you did, have you met those expectations?
Good question. So my expectations are always the biggest in the world. I'm going to take over the world. So my expectations were to really make an impact and a big ripple of impact. And, I think of everything in really grandiose terms. So I've always thought big. And so I'm sure I don't quite remember my thought process, 4.5 years ago. It seems like a lifetime ago in some sense, but I'm willing to bet I was thinking I want this to be as far reaching as possible. And at the same time, I've really gotten to a place. One of the things that I learned with my band, one of the great lessons that I learned in that creative venture, we started out and it was such a joyous thing to make music. And I had these really talented people around me and we were really like tapping into some really magical things like at the time. And then it took a turn into several years in, we've got to make, we were playing with some big bands at the time, like, on the bill with some bands like Linkin Park and Hoobastank and Alien Ant Farm and all these bands that were end up going really big actually. And we were like right there in it. Our bass player's brother was a drummer in No Doubt. And so we were around, all the stuff. And then it turned into, okay, we've got to make it in order to be happy. It's got to be something really significant. We had some pretty hardcore fans. We had people who got our logo tattooed on them and, yeah. But it was like a small, hundreds of people, in Southern California mostly. And so, of course, that wasn't good enough for us. We got to, hold on. Adrian's here at all our shows, and he's just had the biggest song on planet Earth on the FM dial a couple years ago. No doubt, don't speak. Like, it's our turn. Like, we got to get there in order to be happy and content. And now I can look back in retrospect and say, it was a beautiful, powerful experience exactly as it was. I didn't need it to be anything more than what it was. I thought I did, and that brought a lot of dissatisfaction and took something that was really joyous and made it more of a job. And so that was a powerful lesson for me. And so when I set out on this, it was a little different. My expectation was for it to be really far-reaching and impactful and, many of the things that have happened, right? But with a healthier sense of detachment. I didn't need it to be happy, to happen that way in order to be fulfilled. My thoughts were, if it helps one person, it's a success. And I already knew it was helping one person, me. So it was sort of a success in my mind from the jump. But that came from, an 8-year journey of taking something joyous and creative and making it into it has to be something, I need some sort of validation from the world in order for it to be successful, quote unquote. And so I kind of learned that lesson the hard way, I guess you would say, in some ways. But in a way that was perfect for my own soul's journey and evolution. And it's something that I'm passionate about sharing to anyone out there who's thinking about doing something creative or is doing something creative. Do it because you love it and let what may. You don't need it to be, if you're doing it as an artist to be the next, big thing. Oh gosh, like you can have that intention, that's fine, but with a healthy sense of detachment. You don't need it to happen in order to be fulfilled. The making the art itself is the payoff. And yeah, I get it. It can be challenging juggling the financial aspects. And that's one of the beautiful things about, if you do get a lot of notoriety or far reaching, whatever financial resources flow in and all that. Set that intention. That's beautiful. But do not be attached to that, because then you'll turn it from creative, and which in order to be creative, you really need the juices flowing, right? And if you've gotten into this sort of rigid mindset that's all based off of like, ego gratification or material success, then I think you're really cutting off the stream of creativity.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. That's a really big thing that you learned there, that lesson from that mistake, right? Quote unquote mistake.
Right.
This is huge. Making mistakes turns out to be our greatest lessons and our greatest blessing, right?
Yeah.
What would you say would be your biggest mistake that turned out to be your greatest blessing?
Wow, that's a good question. My biggest mistake that turned out to be my greatest. I don't know if I have one really big, like this one stands out more than others. I've been pretty good at making mistakes. But one, one that really stands out to me is, my last two relationships were sort of intimately tied to each other in a way. I met my most recent partner through my previous partner, and there was some like the previous partner I met on my birthday, and there's all the synchronicity there, and definitely like a soulmate energy, if there is such a thing. Not that I claim to be an expert, but I definitely there's like a feeling of like this person, hardcore soul family, and there's some interesting synchronicities that sort of tie into that. And then through her, I met my most recent partner, which I've been single like 3 years now. So this is going back. But when I met my most recent partner through her, I knew I was going to be with that person. I just had this strong intuitive hit. There was no real flirting or connection or anything. And then a year and a half later, to the day, one moved out of town. I broke up. The other moved to town. And then a month later, we were together. It was wild. And I called it and told many people about it, that this was going to happen. And so it was, it's sort of a powerful, altogether, I don't know what, 4 years of relationships or something. But I look back on it now and I realize that I wasn't really very present. And, for me, that same little boy wouldn't sit on my dad's knee and had to go, and focused on all the other things that he wants to do. And I can look back now and and there's some level of regret, because they both really deserved like more of what I'm capable of giving as a human. And they got like, sort of a different version. I mean, even 3 years since I've been single, like the growth has been tremendous. So I can look back now and, it's sort of, it's like, I've been a shitty boyfriend in a lot of ways. When I've been in a relationship, I just wasn't, and it's somewhat of a regret, because I'd really love to give them sort of the love and energy that they were like longing for, that I was sort of evasive with. Like it's sort of, I've had a pattern of the partner really wanting more from me, and I'm just sort of like, I got to go over here though. Like sort of like I end up being a little bit of energetically the runner. Like, and so independent. And so I think that, with both of them, there's some hurt there. And, I guess I would say I have some regret about that, because I would love to be able to, the opportunity to give them what they really sought. And not saying I want to get back together or anything like that, but just like, I wish it had been a little different and I could sort of fix it. And also, but the lesson for it is, whenever a relationship comes back into my life, really, really important for me to be like fully present and to be 111% what I'm capable of being. And so I think, I think I've been somewhat slow to mature in that realm. And, guys take a while, right? We're a little slow. And so I look forward to whenever, I don't need it. I'm completely content being single and all of those things. But I think the next relationship that I have, it'll be very, very different. And I kind of like, there's a little bit of regret, like, I wish I could have kind of given them what they really longed for, because they deserve it. And at the same time, I know it's all in divine order and everything happened as it should, and for everyone's mutual growth too. So
kind of like what we said earlier, once that relationship does come into your life, it will all make sense, because it has prepared you for that.
You're right.
And I think relationships are so beautiful, because it's the one way, like the main way we can really learn about ourselves, because that's where our buttons get pushed, Yeah. So in relationship, we can really grow. So it's
challenging. It's challenging for me too, because, I'm so wide open, and my heart, I'm a king of hearts and my destiny card. And so I have so much heart that yet in relationship, I've noticed I can shut my heart down sometimes and like close it off. And then, and then when I look back and I'm like, I had so much capacity to be so much more loving. And I just sort of like, the grass is greener, or, take things for granted. And so the other thing that happens is, we can all tend to want what we don't have, and really processing all of that subtlety in relationship is an interesting journey for me. And one of the things that I continue, like, it's hard for me. My heart just doesn't turn off. Like, it's like I still adore both of those women. Like, they're both so special to me, yet there's hurt there. I'm not really talking to either of them. They're both in relationships, by the way, at this time. So it's like there's no connection there, and it's like, so there's no outlet for that. And that's kind of challenging, because it seems like a lot of times what other people do is their process is closing down. Like, completely, okay, I'm cutting you out. I'm cutting off any and all feelings. And meanwhile, like, for me, my it's like, I can't just turn off loving someone. Like, it doesn't, right. And actually it grows, like, no matter what. And so that's, a bit challenging when there's no outlet for that. Right. Because on the other end, it's like, nope, that chapter's over, closed, shut that door, and I get it, but I sort of, it's not quite how I function. So it's a little bit of a challenge.
It's okay, B. Like I said before, one day, this beautiful soulmate will come, and it all makes sense at that point. But, she's probably not ready yet. That's what it is.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Or we'd be together, right? So, and I love being single. I mean, it's a wonderful experience. I always say self-love is the number one thing we're all here to learn, because we're fractals of source. And what is source? Alone. And it's the most beautiful love story of all. Falling in, you are your own soul mate. And totally, once you start to get that then you can come together, like next week's Soul Share with Michael Rostowski and Lizzie Locke. They're like these very whole beings who've done so much work, and then they came together. Or like you and Brian, right? Yes. People who've really done the work, and then they come together, and it's not like, oh, you complete me. It's like, oh, I'm whole and you're whole, and we can celebrate life together. And it's not, I'm not, like Michael talks about in that forthcoming interview, he's like, one of the first things when he realized that, oh, I just met my future wife, one of the first things he said to her is, I don't need you, and she said, I don't need you. And that's a powerful thing, instead of like, oh, you complete me and I'm, my better half, and all that energy is sort of, I believe we're evolving past. And so I look forward to really having, each relationship has gotten a little closer to that. And I think the next one will be that full on in a way that none of the others have been,
Yeah. Yeah. You have to be alone and very comfortable with who you are all by yourself before this relationship. Mm-hmm. Perfect relationship is allowed to come in, for sure.
Yep.
So, Brandon, before, I know we're running out of time today, but before we go, I want to ask you one more question. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Brandon Beachum?
Tricky. The meaning of life according to Brandon Beachum is to realize that you give life meaning by the story that you tell, the definition that you give any and all experiences that you have. By the purpose is so that you can remember who and what you truly are, to play the game that you set up prior to coming here, and to understand and recall that you are the creator and created rolled into one, and that you are in your own private YO universe. So who else would make it big? Who else would have the great success? Who else would have the great comeback? There is no one else. You've never experienced through the eyes of another person. The only reality you truly know is from your own perspective. For all you know, what you call blue, I'm seeing pink. Like, you don't really know, right? You're the only one in the room, and you always have been, and everyone's a prop in your movie. And the meaning of life is to remember that, and then take that information and apply it, and experience all the things that you came here to experience. Not just the joy, the hardship, the trial, the triumph, the overcoming obstacles, the whole shebang. That is why you incarnated in this life, to experience it all. And so loving it all and learning to not resist it all is of utmost importance.
Indeed.
I think I might have went over 60 seconds.
Probably a little bit, but that's okay. It was worth it. I mean, yeah.
I'm going to authorize that we don't cut it down.
Awesome. Well, Brandon, thank you so much for doing this today.
Thank you for spur of the moment. I was going to just interview myself, and then I'm like, no, why don't Erica should do it? And of course, you're always like the best sport. You are like so amazing, and I'm so grateful to have you as a part of this ever evolving journey. And all of you out there listening, thank you so much for the 1,000 episodes of support. And, to my future self on episode 2000, sending you so much love. Think of where all of you will be on episode 2000, right? Just envision, use that as just a tool to anchor in your future self. Like these games that we can play, just creating permission slips and ways to sort of tie energy together. They're so much fun. And so 2000 episodes. Wow. I mean, I know I'm going to be like in a whole nother stratosphere of experience. And so are you if you tell that story. So I'll meet you all there. In the meantime, I'll see you along the way. But episode 2000, maybe we'll revisit this, Erica.
Oh, yeah. Fun. All right, you guys. Well, thank you for tuning in today. Brandon, thank you. Why don't you take us out?
Well, this has been quite the journey. 1,000 episode journey. Thank you all so much for co-creating this with me. Truly, it has been a pleasure and an honor to steward it thus far, and couldn't have done it without you. I could have done it without you, but it's been a lot lonelier journey. So thank you all for showing up and continuing to support and share the love. Until next time, journey well. Love you so much.
Love you all.